Hello guys, welcome to the channel. Chase from 3C Miniworks here. This is our 300 swapped Honda Grom, and today we are going to cover the pros and cons of owning a swapped Grom. All right, let's get into this. If you're new here, thank you for stopping by. If you're one of our now 50 subscribers, we hit 50. 50. Who thought? I would have never thought that even like 10 of my closest friends would have actually liked to watch content. So thank you guys so much for subscribing. If you haven't already, consider doing so. Lots of new content coming out. So we'll stop that rant and get to the actual video. Today we're going to cover the pros and cons of riding a swapped Grom, and really it boils down to about three things, for me at least. One, we all know a stock Grom 125, they're fun, they're very fun bikes, they're small, they're nimble, they're super nimble. I like small bikes. I know a lot of people do. That's obviously got a cult following. I've met a lot of friends that also have that same interest. I've met a lot of people through mini bikes in general. And when people talk about getting a swapped Honda Grom or doing the swap themselves, mine is a CBR 300. Another common swap is a 250 CBR. It's often reviewed as, I just want to go faster, or I just want to have more power. And obviously, that's going to be the case. I weigh about 270. I'm 5'11", 270, and it's a powerhouse. I mean, I don't know that I really need any bigger of a bike. It will take me on the highway. It does what I want it to do. Why is my camera on? That's weird. And it's just a great bike. So when we talk about the pros and cons, obviously one is going to be having the power to get out of your own way or just get up a hill or whatever. On my way to work, normally, is about a 55 mile an hour road. This bike will do all of 80, no problem with me on it. So obviously, when I have a stock Grom, a 55, and it's a very hilly road, so 55 miles an hour for me is really tough. Because those up hills, as well as when you got a headwind coming right at you, it is way too much. It bogs me down, and I end up feeling like I'm just not really safe in general. And obviously when you're running a small bike, you don't want to feel unsafe. We're already at a disadvantage. We're small, people don't see us, hence why we always get loud pipes or a loud singular pipe exhaust, and we're always at a disadvantage there. So to have the ability to just give it throttle, like right now I'm doing 50, but I could easily just throttle into it and it'll get me out of the way. I don't have to worry about downshifting constantly to fight hills or wind or whatever. So obviously that's pro number one. I say obvious way too much. I'm sorry. I'll work on that. And let's talk about highway riding for a little bit. The big thing for me in wanting a swapped Grom was always just to have the ability not just to go fast, but be able to maintain those speeds and to travel on these roadways that otherwise wouldn't normally be usable to a stock small bore rider, especially being a larger weight like myself. So by having the swap, I can go on the highway safely. It's still wobbly, don't get me wrong, that's a huge con in itself. If you get a wind gust, I mean, it's very like hunker down and hope for the best. But as far as maintaining speed on a normal day that's not super gusty, it's no problem. I mean, you can take this easily, maintain 70 mile an hour in a headwind and be completely safe doing so, as long as you're, not being an idiot. So that for me was huge, because I want to have the ability to ride my stuff quickly to and from places on the highway, because those are generally the most direct routes. Pro number two. Pro number 2 is really, to me, just the cooler, the wow factor of the swap. You'll notice if you're submersed into the scene, it's definitely a lot more popular of a swap now because it's a direct, easy bolt-on kit for the most part now, aside from wiring. So you're starting to see it pop up more and more, but as a whole, I find the swap to be very fascinating. It's a great option that's still minimally done. So, you know, you're not going to be the necessarily only person with the swap if you go to, say, a big meet or something like that with a lot of Groms, but you're definitely going to be a lower percentage. And for that reason, there's a lot of people that go, wow, what is that? Or people that just aren't informed enough to know that this swap is even a thing. It just makes for good conversation, especially when you're talking. We run into a lot of people that are like older Harley riders or people that have never stepped foot, that's not a good way to put it, but just kind of been on a small bike, and they go, wow, what do you mean that's a 300 swap? Or how do you get that in there? And as you can tell, if you've been searching the swaps or been looking at them, watching videos or anything, it's definitely finagled in there. The engine's not straight up, it's kind of at an angle. So it works, and it fits, and it looks like it's factory, but it's obviously not supposed to be there. So it's definitely, if you know the Honda Grom, it's like, wow, that's really cool. And it sparks interest. It sparks conversation. It makes for a good talking point, and I really like that as far as a pro point to it. And let's talk about pro number 3. So number 3 pro for me is going to be the ability to just be louder. And what do I mean by that? Have a bike that has more displacement than a 125 that can just be louder. And in doing so, let people know that, hey, I'm here, don't run me over, please. Is that too much to ask? Is it? No. But if you're talking about being on a stock Honda Grom, even with an aftermarket exhaust, sure, you can make them loud. But is it still louder or loud enough to make people see you? And I question, depending on what exhaust you have, if that is the case. So myself, when I did the swap, I put a Brooks exhaust, the Megaphone, on this with a, I think it's 2 or 2.5 inch downpipe from PLR. And it was very loud, like extremely loud, to the point where it was deafening. I could throw fire and all that stuff, and it was cool and all for maybe like 1,000 miles. And then it became, hey, I really should probably look out for my safety and make sure that I can actually hear when I'm over 40 years old. So I got with my buddy Tyler, who has a Husqvarna 401, and we took that muffler off of his and put it on the PLR downpipe. And what that did is it effectively gave it a much more factory quiet sound, but if you're getting on it, it's still loud. So you kind of get the best of both worlds where it's muffled. It sounds more like a stock dirt bike than anything at like idle per se. But when you get on it, definitely people can hear you, and it's a plus for me. It does it does confuse a lot of people because it says Husqvarna on the can, which is really comical because people are like, wait, that says Honda up there, but it says Husqvarna down there. What's the deal with that? So that's pretty funny, but I know it is a struggle point for a lot of swap owners because they cannot find an exhaust that's not ear piercing. And so it's two-sided, right? It's a pro in that it can be loud and it's very helpful to let people hear you, but it is so loud that you're either trying to wear headphones or earplugs or trying to deafen it out, hence why I went to, instead of having essentially a straight pipe on that Brooks exhaust, to the Husqvarna 401. And it breathes really well, because when you think about the 401 exhaust, that's meant for something that's a bigger displacement than this. So it never bogs or anything like that, like I would expect it to. And yeah, so that would be really the only other pro. Some of the cons. I know a lot of people don't talk about the cons of things, and obviously that's something that you want to cover because if you're thinking about doing the swap yourself or potentially buying one, you want to know what you're getting into, right? So con number one, and I think most important, especially if you're going to go buy a bike, is a lot of people hack this swap, just like any used bike, but more so the fact that these are coming from bikes that are donors, the CBR donors that might have been wrecked, or let's assume somebody got a bike that actually is in good condition, right? If it is in good condition, that still doesn't mean that the person swapping it is actually going to do it properly. And oftentimes, when people buy swapped bikes, you don't really know what you're getting. You don't know who did it. And even if you do, you don't know how they did it, right? If there's somebody that genuinely knows how to work on things, sure, they might have done it right. But most people love to cut corners. And when we talk about cutting corners, specifically on a swapped engine on anything, whether that be a car, a bike, a scooter, whatever, you're going to have issues with people not knowing how to wire things or wiring things. Really, for me, it always goes back to wiring. Because ultimately, wiring is what gives you the most trouble if something malfunctions. And it's harder to trace than if your, say, spark plug isn't working, or just silly stuff that you can just check spark and ignition, right? But if it's something that, hey, it's not getting spark, but why? And then you trace those wires back and you go, wait, like this has electricity, but what doesn't? And so it's a big headache, or can be a big headache. Now, I'm not saying don't buy a swapped Grom. I think that's a perfect, obviously I own, all my bikes are swapped in some capacity. So I just say be cautious about buying something that you're not 100% sure, like how it was done, who did it, that kind of thing. And aside from that, obviously, again, they're a blast. They're great. So, yeah, just be careful. Con number one. When we talk about con number two, this is something that often comes up in the circle of the small bore community that I'm very fascinated by. People that have owned the swap, or maybe have sold the swap after they have already had it for a little bit, they say that it's too heavy. And that's a very interesting thing for me, because when I talk about a bike being heavy, sure, it might like lean side to side, right? If you have a stock Honda Grom that is easy to whip around, then you might notice the extra, 50 pounds. I haven't actually checked the weight difference of the 125 versus this. I'm sure it's a decent amount, but it's nothing that you're going to notice. And so that to me is very fascinating, because going from a stock bike to this, I didn't notice it. So the people that make that argument, I don't quite get it. It is a con. If it does weigh more, it's harder to whip, it's harder to move, that kind of thing. But take it with a grain of salt. I didn't personally notice it. Con number three. How do you do three? Oh, numbers. Con number three is definitely fuel consumption. Now, I say this because the stock Honda Grom fuel tank is not big in the slightest. So when you take a 125 bike that has a fuel tank that's maybe, I think it's like 1.4 gallons or something like that, and then you stuff a 300 or 250 or something in there that only gets 40 to the gallon, you're effectively lessening your fuel mileage by more than half. A stock Honda Grom, if you're riding it properly, can get you well over 100 miles per gallon, thus only needing a 1.5 gallon fuel tank. That's cool and all until you swap it. Suddenly, you're going 50 miles, which, again, seems like a lot. But if you're in Tennessee with all your guy friends that have stock Groms, or just modified things that don't have lower fuel consumptions, or higher fuel consumptions, I should say, you're going to notice that. They're going to get pissed off that you're asking, hey guys, let's go to the next gas station. And then they go, we just went to the last one. I go, I know, I'm about to die. Like, that's a problem. That's a big problem and a huge pain point. So one of the things that I did on this Grom was I added the extended fuel tank that PLR makes. It's a great option. I think it adds like another 3/4 or so of a gallon. It's not much, but when you talk about squeezing fuel capacity out of such a small bike, it really does make a difference. So on this, I can safely go, say, 80, 90 miles before I'm really going to be like, oh, God, guys, I need something now. So worth noting, if you are going to swap, that is con number 3, that you want to make sure you have a bigger fuel tank. Now, there are guys that will debate this. Some people say, oh, you know, it's fine. I'm used to stopping at the gas station, whatever. But that's not me. Like, if I want to stop at a gas station 24/7, I'd go drive a Duramax or something that gets 8 to the gallon. The reason why I ride bikes isn't just for fuel consumption, but that is definitely one of the perks. So if I'm going to have a bike that I have to live at a gas station for, it's just not fun. There's nothing fun about that. So con number 4. Number 4. The big thing on con number 4 is going to be braking. Now, this is something that, again, it's debatable, much like con number 2 and the bike weight, is that some people have issues with this, some people don't. And what I've boiled it down to is some people have braking issues with the bigger swaps, mainly because of how their suspension is set up. Example, I, again, am a heavier rider, and when we went down to Tennessee last year, I had a stock rear brake on this with the swap, and riding through the Dragon, I could not figure out why, but on turns, my rear end just kept wanting to slip out on me. It was the weirdest thing. I wasn't applying more braking to the rear end, but for whatever reason, through most of the turns, it was just very wobbly. It felt really uncomfortable, and honestly, it was a safety issue, and I was very worried about it. So one of the things I very quickly did upon my return from Tennessee that year was I added a dual brake bracket in the rear. So this is primarily something that normally stunters use because they'll put like a hand brake, or what do I call that? Like instead of their foot brake, they'll put a hand brake to control their rear so that they can wheelie properly, or better, I should say. I don't wheelie, I wouldn't know, but that's general gist of it. And by adding that rear extra brake caliper, I figured, hey, I'll add more stopping power. And it definitely did. Don't get me wrong. As soon as I hit, because I plumbed it all into my rear brake pedal, so whenever I hit my foot brake, it comes to a screeching stop. I can do stops from like 20 feet and just burn rubber as I'm stopping. It's the weirdest thing. And but I noticed too, when I go through turns after I did that swap, is it still didn't necessarily not make it wishy-washy, which made no sense whatsoever. And then I decided, well, hey, maybe it was just the angle at which I'm riding. I am a forward rider, so I tend to be more over top of my handlebars, especially on a stock Grom that's generally like more flat-seated. And so through those turns, once I lowered the rear end, love you, that's my wife in front of me. Once I lowered the rear end on the Grom, I put I think it's a 2.5-inch lowering link on the back, and it made a night and day difference. So then it got me to wondering, was this a braking issue or was it a suspension issue? Because essentially my weight, let's get it! Woo! This is the best part about swaps. So essentially, when I was going through turns, was it because my brake wasn't grabbing, or was it because my weight was more forward, thus not putting enough on the rear to keep it down on the road? And I think it really was a combination of both, but I still throw that out there because the brakes definitely improved when I added the dual caliper setup. So I definitely would recommend that, because at the very least, you still have a much bigger motor than what came factory with it, and it's already a small frame. So you're going to want to make sure you have the stopping power. Even if you don't need it, you still want the option, right? If somebody pulls out in front of me, just like on a stock bike, you can brake, but if you're going faster, in theory, because you have a bigger motor and you want to be able to have the option to slow down just as fast or faster. So that's con number 4. All in all, you can tell there's obviously quite a few cons, but do the pros outweigh the cons? And for me, I would absolutely say they do. Because at the end of the day, if I want to ride a slow bike fast, it's a ball. But if I want to ride a fast bike slow, it's not nearly as fun. And so the 300 swap or the 250 swap allows me to ride that otherwise normally slow bike fast. And for me, it's so enjoyable. So enjoyable. There's nothing better. And you can just rip around. They're easy. They're super maneuverable. If I got a 300 Rebel, right, it's got a longer wheelbase. It's more of a cruiser. It's heavier. Like, everything about a bike that would normally be a 300 or up generally has a bigger wheelbase, or it's a bigger bike. It's heavier. Just everything about it is not conducive to the same riding effect that you would have riding a Honda Grom. So again, for me, sure, there's many cons, and you could talk about many more than what I just listed in this video, but just having the ability to enjoy it and go fast and just get to point A and point B without getting run over because I can get out of my own way, it's a no-brainer. So if you're interested in the swap or have any questions, feel free, drop a comment below. I'd love to talk it out with you. Or if you have issues with your swap, I know that's another thing in itself. Again, going back to people not knowing what they're doing when they swap them. But otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope you stick around for the journey because we got a lot of new stuff coming your way. So I'm Chase, 3C Mini Works. See you on the next one.